Hello everybody, and today I'm going to be talking about some of the big ideas from chapters 9 to 11 of Neil Postman's book, Amusing Ourselves to Death. In these chapters, Postman argues that television, because it's all about entertainment, actually stops us from thinking deeply about serious topics, especially in religion, politics, and education. For this video, I'll be covering 3 key questions. First, I'll explain how television affects these areas and share whether or not I agree with Postman. Second, I'll break down why Postman thinks that Aldous Huxley or whatever, his warnings are more relevant than George Orwell's. And finally, I'll talk about J.P. Moreland's idea of the empty self and explain how the church can push back against the negative effects of entertainment culture. So there's a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and get in. All right, let's start with how television affects religion, politics, and education. So, first of all, let's look at religion. Postman argues that TV turns religion into entertainment. Think about TV preachers, right? Instead of focusing on deep spiritual growth, it often becomes about flashy shows and emotional moments and feel-good messages. Sermons get shorter and everything is aimed at keeping viewers entertained. This turns worship into a performance. I think Postman has a very good point here. When faith becomes more about how it feels than how it challenges us, it can lead to shallow spirituality. So next is politics. On TV, politics is less about ideas and more about images. Candidates are judged by how they look on screen, how clever their one-liners are, or how well they win, quote-unquote win, a debate, rather than their actual policies. It's all about quick sound bites and catchy moments. Think of how debates today are more like reality TV shows than serious conversations about the future. I think Postman's critique is spot on. Voters are often swayed by charisma and media presence instead of real substance. Finally, there's education. TV makes learning feel like it should always be fast, fun, and exciting. Shows like Sesame Street can teach your kids numbers and letters, but the problem is they also teach kids that learning should always be entertaining. When students get older and face slower, more difficult learning, they might give up because it doesn't feel fun. I think this problem is even worse today with TikTok and YouTube, where people expect to learn everything in like 60-second clips. So, do I agree with Postman's critique? Absolutely. Religion, politics, and education have all been shaped by entertainment culture, and we see it more clearly than ever today. TV was just the beginning. Social media, YouTube, TikTok have all made it even harder for people to slow down and really reflect and think deeply about important issues. Next, let's talk about Aldous Huxley's versus George Orwell. Both of them imagined dystopian futures, but they saw the problem very differently. Orwell's vision in 1984 was a world controlled by fear, oppression, and censorship. The government tells people what they can and can't do, what they can and can't think, and they use fear to keep people in line. Huxley's vision is in a brand new world was very different. People aren't controlled by fear, but by pleasure and distraction. People aren't forced to obey, they just choose to obey because life feels good. They're given endless entertainment, comfort, and pleasure, so they never stop to think about deeper things. Postman argues that Huxley's view is much closer to what we're living through today. We're not being controlled by fear or censorship. Instead, we are so caught up in entertainment, TV, social media, video games, endless controlling, that we don't things like TV, social media, video games, endless scrolling, that we don't notice the things that really matter. I think Postman is absolutely right. People aren't being forced to stop thinking, they're just doing it willingly because it's easier to watch Netflix or scroll TikTok than it is to read a book or engage with deep ideas. If you think about it, people today are more addicted to distractions than ever before. Companies like TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube know how to keep us hooked. Their goal is to keep you on their platform as long as they possibly can, feeding you what you like instead of what challenges you. It's not censorship, it's addiction. And honestly, that's the scariest kind of control. Now, let's connect all of this to J.P. Moreland's idea of the empty self and the role of the church. So, what is the empty self? Well, Moreland describes it as a person who is passive, self-centered, and constantly looking for entertainment or comfort. The empty self doesn't want to think deeply, face hard truths, or deal with discipline. They avoid struggling and prefer whatever feels good in the moment. If we connect this idea to Postman's argument, it's clear that TV, and now social media, feeds into that mindset. Instead of challenging us to grow, these platforms make it easier to sit back, scroll, and consume whatever makes us feel good. Over time, people become more shallow, more self-focused, and less able to face the thought and the tough work of spiritual growth and personal development. So, what can the church do about it? Well, I think the church has a unique role to play in reversing these trends. First, the church can encourage people to reflect deeply. Instead of fast, shallow, feel-good messages, churches can focus on discipleship, teaching people to engage with Scripture and asking questions, and wrestle with truth. The goal isn't entertainment, it's transformation. Second, the church can emphasize spiritual discipline like prayer, fasting, and serving others, whereas these are activities that push people to think beyond themselves. Finally, the church can offer community. In a world where people are just isolated behind screens and real-life communication offers something that social media can never, authentic human connection. And the church can remind people that life isn't about constant entertainment. It's about purpose, growth, and relationships. If the church steps up in these ways, it can be one of the strongest forces for pushing back against the empty self, an entertainment-driven world that we live in. To wrap it all up, let's review the main points. So Neil Postman's argument that television changes how we think about religion, politics, and education by making everything feel like entertainment instead of a deep reflection. We can get catchy sound bites and flashy preachers and fun, fast learning, but that shouldn't be the point. He also says that we should pay more attention to Huxley's Brave New World than Orwell's from 1984. The real danger isn't control by fear, it's control by distraction. We willingly give up the ability to deeply think for the leisurement of endless entertainment. Finally, J.P. Moreland's idea of the empty self shows us how entertainment culture shapes people to be passive, shallow, and addicted to comfort. But the church can offer something different. By prompting discipleship, spiritual discipline, and true community, the church can be a place where people grow beyond the empty self into something more whole and complete. So here's a final question for you to think about. How much of your time is being spent being entertained, and how much of it is being spent actually being transformed? If we want to live with depth and purpose, we have to be willing to step away from constant entertainment and pursue things that challenge us. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. You guys have a pleasant day, and I can't wait to hear some of your comments.